Hi, my name is Jack Schwartz. I'm a psychoanalyst in private practice in northern New Jersey. I'm affiliated with the New Jersey Institute for Training in Psychoanalysis, as well as the Object Relations Institute in Manhattan, New York. I'll be speaking about topics related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the topic of this discussion will be two areas, really. An area involving countertransference, which I'll go into some detail, and also dreams. So I'm going to put this together. So I call this kind of a countertransference dream and the novel COVID virus, a self-study. To begin, as the dimensions of the COVID-19 pandemic have become an ever-increasing and oppressive reality, we as mental health practitioners, beyond the disruption and reorganization of our daily lives and practices, are encountering strong emotional, physiological, psychological countertransferences that can impact our ability to effectively engage in this time of national crisis. We could take the inspiration from the founder of psychoanalysis, Freud himself, who was no stranger to many societal crises during the course of his psychoanalytic journey, having faced a world war, rabid anti-Semitism, cancer treatments, and even severe pandemics, such as the Spanish flu, of which I had lost his oldest daughter. Freud taught that the answer to our survival follows two paths: the external truth we must deal with, in other words, the reality principle, as well as the internal truth we must master, our unconscious primitive fears and wishes. For Freud, he turned to his self-analysis, mainly using his dreams to offer the key insights to cultivate his new theory of human consciousness. I would hope that hearing this, you could similarly find use in the process I'll be presenting, especially how it will relate to the topic of countertransference during the time of this national emergency. In my understanding, countertransference falls generally into two categories. One being induced or objective, that is, feelings, cognitions projected from the patient into the practitioner. And second, the second countertransference idea is subjective countertransference, meaning that it is the analyst's internal self-dynamics, irrespective of the patient's input. It is recognized that the dance of objective and subjective emotion and cognitions is quite complicated and never a pure field of experience. It's never always coming from the patient or just coming from the analyst. It's always a back and forth. In other words, the analyst and the patient are always influencing each other. After a long day with patients using telecommunications, this is recently, I was struck with the severity and the visceral impact of what my patients as well as the world is contending with. The next day, I awoke to this dream. This dream took place in, I'd say about 6 weeks ago, early spring. We're about, I'd say, a month and a half into the pandemic. And the dream, I'll just lay out the dream, and also then I'll do my interpretations to the dream and my free association to the dream. I was in a nice car. This is after a day of seeing patients. I had this dream. I woke up to it. I was in a nice car, a sedan. I was with other people. I didn't want to be with them. Then went into another car, and I was driving on the road. Then I noticed there were rats and other dirty creatures crawling on the side of the road. Then I saw a bat flying toward me. The bat was outside the window of my car. I felt safe with this. It was really the windshield of my car, not just the window, it was the windshield. The bat was outside my windshield of my car. I felt safe with this since the bat was on the other side of the windshield. Then I soon discovered the bat was able to enter through the windshield. I felt a wave of anxiety, but I was interested to get to where I had to go. There may have been another person or passenger in the seat next to me, perhaps a woman. I ended up at a house sale where they were selling old objects, antiques, and antique books from the 19th century. The books caught my attention. I pulled one out and opened it. And these were interesting books. They were very old, but the covers were not original. And I wasn't sure I wanted to buy them. Then the bat appeared from behind the books and scurried to hide behind the books. There were other people, but I took out a stick, poking the books, trying to root out where the bat was, using a stick to move and poke the books and make the bat appear so I can kill it. Well, if as you're listening to the dream, you could begin to see references to all types of analogies and metaphors that I'm working with as the dream unfolds. That I think easily could be connected to, linked to the current circumstances. But here's my analysis. At the first, I tried to avoid analyzing the dream. That's just my first reaction to this dream. The dream made me feel anxious and frankly unnerved. Then I sat with the dream, forcing the memory of it to return to me. Then I thought of the dream researcher, Calvin Hall. I study dreams, so I know a little bit about Calvin Hall, who used to emphasize how dreams both illustrate a problem and offer a solution to a problem. So this, of course, I know is true, having spent countless hours in my practice studying dreams and witnessing firsthand how dreams operate. Freud too saw this in his, quote, specimen dream, the dream of Irma's injection, which I've written about earlier in an earlier paper. And in that dream of Irma's injection dream takes place in chapter 2 of Interpretation of Dreams. And actually, it's a true beginning of interpretation of dreams, where in the dream, the context of the manifest dream, the remembered dream, Freud is trying to come to terms with being doubted about his clinical acumen. That's the problem in the dream. And he finds a solution, the wish in the dream for retribution against the people who would doubt him. The solution in the dream. The actual solution of the specimen dream for Freud was, in fact, the method, which he tells us is free association. That's the solution he was looking for, which became the foundation, the very cornerstone of the psychoanalytic investigation. Even with the associational method at our disposal, the solution one is looking for is often not readily available, and and sometimes working with the manifest dream is necessary to extract the more latent truth. I also knew that the very act of remembering a dream and expressing it, whether it's on paper or to another person, or to a virtual audience, may be the actual point of the dream, that is, a wish to share. The car at the beginning of the dream was nice, a kind of luxury car that had a remote key locking mechanism and that made a comforting door slam of a quality vehicle, meaning I felt safe. This was a reference to my home office and a displacement, since all my patients are remotely working with me and often speak to me in their cars. So the word remote and cars, which they find the most private and easily accessible location for a session. The not wanting to be with other people first was experienced as an irritation in the dream. reflecting a discussion with a patient who was not taking the social distancing measures seriously, which irritated me. As I traveled in my car to my office, I felt the world outside was unclean, germ-ridden, dirty, signified by the rats and other unsightly creatures. I remembered seeing in the news show the night before how the virus probably emerged from an unclean, wet markets in China. The bat appears flying toward me in some gothic shadow phantom way, but I felt relief since I was in my car, safe and secure from the vermin and then the creatures that could not infect me. Of course, it was reported that the COVID-19 virus possibly originated in bats, which appears a central element to my dream. Early in the day, a patient mentioned to me that he can't believe people would eat bats, which seemed revolting, similar to the feeling in the dream, in the presence of the bat. The most unnerving element in the dream was how the bat was able to pass through my windshield, which I thought was secure. I was thinking about the masks I was using and reusing, thinking if they were still effective to protect me from this life-threatening virus. Is there any escape from this contagion? The patient expressed to me deep concern. I think we're all going to get it. I internally agreed. The house sale element with the books, if anybody knows me, would observe my typical preoccupation with book collecting, especially antique books. I recognized the antique books and the house sale reflected a wish to return to the previous phase of my life before the virus and other health issues were so present for me. The antique book I picked up at the sale had the date of 1814, which was reference to an antique copy of a Jane Eyre, and the Jane Eyre edition I have, and the antique Jane Eyre edition, and the biographical introduction, which says Charlotte Bronte was born in 1816. Earlier that day, I was taking stock of my collection and pulled out an antique copy of Jane Eyre and was impressed with the phrase from the preface, a novel be better understood and more justly appreciated by our acquaintance with something of the character of the author and more knowledge of the author's circumstance and surroundings. I like that line. I was thinking about it that day, which I also think is thoroughly true about dreams. Why 1814? I believe had more to do with the number 14 reflecting a particularly critical age in my life, which I'll not go into for this paper, on this presentation. The old books had new covers, which is sometimes how I see myself, covering up old insecurities. The books also represented a distraction, a form of denial of the real world, and any ardent collector would know what I mean by this comment. Yet the bat appears amongst the books, shaking me back to my reality, lurking and insidiously causing fear and uncertainty, reminding me of a mouse that invaded my college dorm. I took a stick and tried to root the bat out like I did with my college mouse in order to kill it. The it refers to my own fear and the anxiety in my patients, both subjective and objective countertransference operating in unison. It, my fear and the anxiety in my patients. This is also a reference to the work I do, inasmuch that I listen to my patients to root out the source of their conscious anxiety, bring to light the underlying, often hidden, sometimes painful origins. As I unpacked the dream, I noticed my reluctance to pursue the vague presence of another person in the car. I recall thinking it was a woman and she was in the passenger seat. I thought of the people I treat and how they are kind of passengers in the therapeutic relationship, since it could be said that I am steering the treatment in the driver's seat. In a way, I substituted my office for a car, just like what my patients were doing in real life. I was drawn to how exposed I felt, especially if the passenger would see how anxious I was in regard to this threat, the bat. I would lose my facade, the book cover, my holding function for the patient and create more anxiety for them. The passenger's vagueness then touched off a feeling from my early childhood related to the rather vague relations I had with both parents, along with other family situations, and how much anxiety and vulnerability and guilt it set up for me, and how I filled this vagueness with fears of unseen things that could hurt or even kill me, which mirrored the feelings I had for this pandemic situation, and the notion of the infection as an unseen killer, and the vague leadership we are receiving from the authorities. I was reminded of a male patient who, after years of back and forth and testing me, how we've come to establish a solid working relationship. He had been violently abused and persecuted from his mother, often feeling terrorized, emasculated, and vulnerable. He remarked half-jokingly, "It's funny, I look around and see all this fear and anxiety because of this pandemic that everyone has today. And I realize that everyone feels now the way I have always felt." I resonated with his comment, on a personal level, and how he made me think and link to his past, and how he linked his past to the present with a very creative observation. The dream speaks to my wish to both avoid and ignore the threatening reality of my current life situation. The nature of this dreadful virus and the level of its contagiousness is only recently coming to light, as suggested in the dream. I feel a physical sense of dread fatigue as I watch the news and cases and fatalities grow. Like most people, I want to return to the past before all this happened. Like most, I want to pretend that things are normal and regular. I try to moderate my news exposure, which helps. But perhaps some avoidance and distraction is useful these days. However, my work with my patients is built on the principle of rooting out as well as facing and holding the sense of dread that can often be part and parcel of today's therapeutic conversation. The key element in the dream is to be aware that the dread, like the virus itself, can be contagious, penetrating our defenses and become destructive to our well-being. Thus, it is important to be able to talk and write about it, dream about it, discuss it, write stories, poetry, paint a picture, but be able to express it with friends and colleagues to neutralize the effects of this dread. We as mental health practitioners are on the front line of this pandemic, and in the time ahead, our ability to stay focused and effective will be needed more than ever. The dream speaks to me of the wish to show courage and a willingness to confront this situation and bring it to light, to show itself, and that my current anxieties are both a product of an induction, which is a contagion, is from the contagion of anxiety induced from my patients, and also connected subjectively to my past childhood catastrophes. I had been frustrated throughout the week during the time of this dream, both in my personal opinion and for my patients with the lack of adequate testing for this virus, which continues to this day, which unfortunately has, of this writing, is ongoing. The dream speaks to this frustration also. If we can see it in my dream, we can kill it. In a way, Freud implied this in his method by making the unconscious conscious. That is, if we can intently and bravely face the unfaceable, we no longer have to fall victim from it. Thank you. I appreciate you listening to this conversation and discussion. And I look forward to feedback. My email is psyjack@msn.com, psyjack@msn.com. Thank you so much. The Object Relations Institute Ina Rosenbeit, for helping me put this together. Thank you.